technology. As of about 5 minutes ago, we didn't even have an internet connection for our guest here, Ryan. So, anyways, kind of a rocky start there. But obviously, a few of you can hear me. If you guys want to, there's a slight echo, it looks like George is saying. Oh, that's probably on your end, Ryan. Maybe you could lower your speakers. Well, we gotta love technology, but the information here is going to be worth it. So anyways, let me introduce you guys to Ryan Bays. He's with Proliant, which is a national payroll company. He's been with them, or the business has been open for, I believe, 20 years. I'm sorry, I'm all messed up here. Ryan, why don't you just take it away here and go ahead and introduce yourself? I got to get my bearings straight from not knowing that we were live.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea. My name is Ryan Bays. I work with a company called Proliant. We're a national payroll company. We've been in business for 20 years. I've been in the payroll industry for going on 6 years now. I'm a district manager. I actually work out of Greensboro, North Carolina currently. And my company works with predominantly restaurants. We're about 40 to 45% of our business is restaurants. So the ACA is something that impacts our customer base fairly significantly. And it's something that we developed the system kind of to help out. And I found with working with my customers that the knowledge base out there is something that is a little bit lower than where it needs to be. And there's some significant impact with the way that these things are changing as we move through the year. So kind of to give you a little bit of background in navigating through the ACA, which is our first slide here. And I guess I'll just kind of move along and go straight into the presentation. But our goals today are going to be basic understanding of the ACA, some rules that you'll need to pay attention to as you move forward with your businesses. Everybody's going to be a little bit different, so there's not going to be any silver bullet answers for everybody, but there are some key factors that everybody kind of needs to pay attention to. We're going to look at implementation, how you're going to handle this for your business, and I'll talk to you a little about maybe some best practices and some things that I've worked on with my customers that'll allow them to minimize some of the cost impact for the ACA or how that's going to affect them, and then some other money-saving tactics that those customers are going to be utilizing along with some things that we've kind of put in place and some strategies that those folks are going to be utilizing in order to be able to minimize the amount of out-of-pocket money that they will be out due to the healthcare changes. So if anybody doesn't know, ACA, also referred to as PPACA or Obamacare, is something that went into effect actually October of 2012 was the start date for measurements, although that information did not come out to businesses until February of 2013. What companies are now going to have to do is track employees, and we'll kind of go through some of that a little bit later on in the presentation to determine whether they're a large employer and then B, if they are going to be subject to penalties or have to pay additional for health insurance for their employees. So we'll kind of go through our agenda here. The questions: am I affected? How do I know many FTE employees I have? So FTE. How much is this going to cost me? Would I be better paying a penalty? How am I going to track this? And then what are some strategies that I can use to lower my possible costs? Let's move into the first question: am I affected? So larger businesses or larger employers, which you'll see right here, is 50 or more full-time equivalent employees are going to be considered by the federal government from this point in time out as a large employer. Large employers are subject to new benefits requirements under the ACA. So what that means is that you will either have to pay for health insurance for people who qualify, or you will have to pay a penalty. And the way that you handle the tracking for this is that you are going to add your full-time employees plus your part-time employees, and they're going to end up being a full-time equivalency number. I'll kind of get through in the next slide and show you how this number is calculated, because that is an important part and piece of the puzzle of how you're going to determine where you're going to stand as far as penalties, pay or play. If you have more than one location under common ownership, you may be subject to aggregation rules. Aggregation rules are going to be having multiple locations that are as a common ownership, where your employees are going to pull together. So if you have 3 or 4 locations with 25 employees in it, those employees are actually going to aggregate together, and even though each one of those locations is not over the 50 full-time equivalency number, it actually may still mean that you are a large business. The only way you can really decide this or determine this individually would be to work with your accounting professional to determine exactly what that number is going to be. Additionally, if you have partnerships with other people that you work with or that have ownership stake in your business, then you definitely do need to kind of take into account what their other businesses are, how much of a share of your company they own, and do they require you to aggregate with those other employers. So if you have one location, you're a half owner in it, and you have a partner, and they own a larger business that's over the full-time equivalency, you could potentially still aggregate together, which would mean that you may be pulled up into a large employer status. So the only way to really kind of determine that would be to work with your accountant or accounting professional, determine exactly where that number is for you. So you'd really kind of have to do a bit of homework on your own there. To go to the next screen, we're looking at full-time equivalency. So full-time equivalency, and how do you know how many people you have? You're going to take your number of full-time employees. Now, full-time is now considered 30 hours and above. So if you have employees that are working for you who are reasonably expected to work over 40 hours, or 30 hours, excuse me, not 40 anymore, those people would be considered full-time equivalent employees, and you would put them into a bucket. Then you would add those individual employees and count each one as one, with the number of hours the part-time employees work per month divided by 120. 30 hours per week for 4 weeks equals 120. You average that over the course of a year. So if you have a number of employees that are working for you, let's say you have 3 employees and they're each working 10 hours a week, that actually equals 1 full-time equivalent employee, and that's where your number is. If you're over 50, then you are going to be considered a large employer. That rule goes on a calendar year basis. So if you say from January 1st till December 31st, you average over that number, then you're considered full-time or large employer, and you're going to be subject to the ACA. How much is this going to cost me? The million-dollar question. So maybe a better question would be, is it less expensive to pay the penalties than it is to provide insurance? And this is where you're going to have to take a look at where you are with your business, how many employees it is that you have, and then determine what the penalty payments are going to be if you elect not to. If you already offer insurance, then you are doing this already, the cost is really going to be more subject to what your insurance policy is, or how your insurance policy is set up. So insurance costs would be something that you would need to go through with your health insurance provider. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. Different states are different, different locations, different employee pools. All of that information is going to be able to be pulled together, and they'll be able to help you out with that. Something that you really kind of need to think about here is going to be the penalties of no coverage or the penalties of unaffordable coverage. Unaffordable coverage is something that's over 9.5% of the employee's W-2 wages for that period of time. There are different calculations for penalty. Most people are going to be subject to this one, which is the no coverage penalty. That means that for every employee that you have that qualifies for over 30 hours and also goes to the exchange to get insurance, and that's a key factor, those employees are going to possibly cost you $2,000. So how does that come into play? After the first 30, which are excluded, then you have a $2,000 fine if you're not offering insurance. So let's say, as an example, let's say I have a business, I have 30 full-time equivalent employees or over that I'm not offering health insurance to. This is after I've been determined to be a full-time employer. and I have 35 that are on the books that are over. 30 of them, let's say, go to the exchange and they want insurance, that I don't get hit with those. The additional 5 after that go to the exchange and they all get insurance. That means that I have a $2,000 penalty for each one, which would equal about a $10,000 penalty for my company. If you wanted to do a calculation to try and figure out what's the best idea, whether you're going to offer health insurance or you're going to pay the penalties, it's kind of the idea of how you do the calculation for that. And depends on your size. Larger businesses with a few hundred employees going to have a much greater penalty, and insurance costs may be a better option for them, as opposed to mid-sized companies who may not necessarily exceed that 30 threshold. So they may not have to actually pay the penalties, even if you do not offer health insurance as a full-time equivalent 50-plus employer who's subject to the ACA. So how do we track this? Or did I skip a slide? Okay, no. How do we track this? Measurement periods. Every business is going to have a measurement period, and Ryan had sent out some information. Most businesses are actually starting their measurement period starting January of this year, although there are some options where you could actually go in and pull information from October of 2013 moving forward. So you have a measurement period that's set by the business. You have to determine this. It's something that you really need to pay attention to and start now, as opposed to a later date when the information is not something that you can adjust. The more information you have for your company currently, the more you can manage your business a little bit better and manage your scheduling better and more efficiently. It'll help you as you move into your stability period. So three things that you need to track: measurement periods, the administrative period, and stability period. The administrative period is the period after your measurement. So let's use an example of a 9-month measurement. I'm going to start January 1. I'm going to run through September or the end of September of this year, and then I'm going to have an administrative period. And where that is the period of time where my employees who have been qualified as a full-time equivalent, over 30-hour employee, would then be able to be administered their health insurance. Whether they decline that coverage or whether they want to enroll, I can set that up as a 1-month, 2-month, 90-day option. So the 3 months essentially is what you have as your administrative period or up to. You don't have to take that entire time. And then your stability period is the period of time that the status is determined during measurement period will remain the same during this, even if the employee's hours increase or decrease. So if you have a full-time equivalent employee, they've averaged, let's say it's 32 hours for the initial measurement period that you have. For the next measurement period or stability period, they will still stay a full-time equivalent employee. So just because their hours drop down does not mean that they are not eligible for health insurance benefits. They will stay eligible over that period of time. In the meantime, there's a new measurement that's going on to determine what they're going to be after that measurement period and after their health insurance runs up for that particular time.
Ryan, did we have a survey we wanted to, did you want to ask?
Oh, yes. Forgive me.
No, that's okay.
So,
It's a rough start.
I was cruising along. So the question that I want to ask, and I'll give you a minute or so to answer here, is do you know how many of your employees average over 30 hours per week? So yes, no, and why does it matter? Okay.
Sounds like
hopefully you've finished that by this time. I'm going to finish up the survey.
Yeah, go ahead and wrap it up.
Okay. To go back to the presentation, now we're going to take a look at some strategies. So the companies that I work with, everybody's a little bit different, and everybody's going to utilize something a little bit differently to help themselves. Whether your goal is to manage your employees underneath a certain time frame, manage your staff so that you have a certain number of people that are going to qualify and you're going to offer benefits to, or whether you're going to try and manage underneath the 50 full-time equivalency testing. Then there's a lot of different things to kind of take into account. The first one that generally comes up for me is that we're going to keep employees under 30 hours. So that's what a lot of the companies that I work with want to do. So they understand that it takes a certain amount of time to do their job, to run their restaurants or their facilities. They can't necessarily adjust the number of hours in a day or the amount of time that it takes to run that facility, and they're not going to slow down their business. So what they try to do is keep their employees underneath that 30-hour threshold. And the way that you can do that is by monitoring and making sure that you're keeping up with scheduling, making sure that the managers or the people who are involved with that understand who is supposed to be getting hours, who is not supposed to be getting hours. And it is a bit complex, but you can make those changes as you move forward. The longer a period of time that you have, the better it is for you in order to be able to do that. Second thing that comes up, lots of businesses have started to take a look at adding employees. Now, not everybody is able to do this. You kind of dilute your employee pool a lot of times when you start bringing on people. You don't want to just hire anybody that's off the street. But if you're looking at making some adjustments or making some changes and you need to average out a few extra hours per person, adding a few more employees to what you normally have is something that's going to be able to drop those average hours down. If your goal is to average these employees or keep these employees under 30 hours so that they're not qualified for benefits, you don't have that additional cost. So what can you also do? Depending on the type of the business that you're running, you can possibly increase seasonal help. If seasonal help is not going to make it through a measurement period a lot of times, so they wouldn't be subject to, and seasonal help in general is not going to be subject to the ACA regulations. There are different calculations that go into effect for the ACA as it pertains to seasonal help, which would take a little bit too long in this. But you can add those folks, which a lot of times will actually decrease the number of hours that you have distributed amongst your employees over high times. You can push hours to a few employees. So if you understand that you're going to be over the 50 full-time equivalency and you are going to have a number of people that are going to qualify for this, then what may help you out is if you just limit the number of people that you have. So what you don't want to have is 100 people that average 31 hours if you're trying to average out underneath and not offer benefits to everybody. What you can do is have a certain number of those people who maybe go 30, 40, even 50 hours per week so that you can diminish the amount of hours that you're having to distribute to a larger majority of the employees that you have. So making sure that you manage that number a little bit more efficiently, determine the employees that you or your management want to push those hours to, probably have a conversation with them ahead of time, let them know that you're looking at giving them more hours. Is that something that they could take on? Other businesses are going to run longer measurement periods. So employee attrition is something that every restaurant has to work with or deal with. You're going to have people that just time out. What is that number for you? Do you keep employees 6 months, 9 months, 3 months? How long is it that your average employee stays with you? If that number is under 12 months, then you're in very good shape with being able to manage this. What that means is that if you have a 12-month measurement period, you actually will not have to worry about that employee if they do not make it to the end of their measurement period. So why is this important for you right now? The importance of this right now is that if you start your measurement period now, you can manage your hours properly for the staff, and then you can also have a longer measurement period. So that means that some of the folks who may have qualified will drop off. You will not have to worry about them hitting you as a eligible employee because they may not be with you any longer. It's not the case for everybody. A lot of restaurants have more people that stay on for a long period of time. It just is something that's subjected to certain people. Last, pushing hours to employees who may not want insurance. So insurance costs everybody. Insurance costs you as the employer if you're offering it. Not offering it could cost you a penalty. Now, what you may have heard recently, on the news or every place else, there are individual mandates that require people to offer or to have health insurance. There is a penalty that may be assessed if people do not have that. Well, that penalty is very minimal. It's about $95, and now that's going to go up moving forward. Now, if you want to, you can try to divert some hours to people who are not going to want insurance. You'll have a number of people on your staff who probably, if you tell them you're going to take $10 out of their paycheck, much less $100 out of their paycheck for insurance, are going to say, no, they don't want it. You may have people who are under their parents' insurance policy. One nice thing about the ACA is that it extended benefits to people under 26 years old so that they would be able to stay under their parents' policy for a longer period of time. Additionally, you may have people who are under spousal coverage. So if they have a husband or a wife that has insurance, they may not elect to take yours. So if you know those people that are not going to elect to take the coverage, whether it be for somebody else having the coverage or that they would never elect to take anything out of their paycheck because they wouldn't be able to pay the rent if they don't take home exactly this dollar amount, then those are people that you could potentially take a look at and say, this is how I'm going to use, or this is a strategy I'm going to use as my business, so that we would be able to possibly bring ourselves underneath that threshold if that is your goal. So after that, we're going to kind of take a look at a possible plan. So the plan is going to be how are you going to tackle this? What's the effect going to be on your business? Taking these things, which now we have a base knowledge of how the ACA is going to work. We have some strategies. What's your plan moving forward? How are you going to implement this with your system? Now, everybody's system is going to be a little bit different. My company obviously does this, and I'll kind of show you how we do it here in just a moment. But you may have an alternate system. You may have a point of sale that's able to do something. You may be tracking it via spreadsheets. There's a lot of different things that kind of take into account. The idea is that you put into a plan the most effective and efficient method that you have, and not wait to do this till later on. So kind of to give you some background on my company, again, we do about 40 or 45% of our businesses with restaurants. So this, again, was something that we developed because we knew it was going to be important to our customer base. It is something that I haven't seen anybody else actually doing outside. Most people are doing just average hours reports, and it's okay, but it's not something that you're really going to be able to take all of those strategies, put them into one, and have a very easy and concise way to do it. You will have to do some work for this in order to be able to save yourself that money. So like I said at the beginning of the presentation, this information came out in February of last year. We put this in place, and we built a system that actually integrates into the payroll and handles the tracking mechanisms, all of the rules that I'll show you here in just a minute, and then additionally was able to handle all of the reporting capabilities with whatever government agency that the Fed throws at us that's going to be required to have this information. Some of the customers that we're working with currently that handle this are bigger names. You probably are familiar with them. We probably do about 30% of the McDonald's nationally right now, along with a number of others. Additionally, individual restaurants who are also subject to this are folks that are our customers, but those are some companies that we work with currently. And a portion of the reason that they are working with us, obviously, would be the ACA system that we offer and kind of how we're handling this currently. So we're very good at it. I'll kind of go into how my company handles this, and you can kind of use this to decide, what it is that you can do within your system, and what are the things that you need to be able to do in order to be able to manage this more properly. So tracking average hours relative to employer-specific measurements, admin, and stability periods. We walked through what those measurement, admin, and stability periods were. Everybody's going to be different. Additionally, as you move forward, those numbers are going to change. And I'll show you in a subsequent slide kind of how that works. But when you start, it's not going to be as difficult as once you get into it. This year for your measurement period is actually going to be the easiest time that you have to measure people. And the reason for that is everybody's starting at the same time. Now, as you move through and employees move along and then come on board with you, their measurement periods are all going to be different. So that's where this comes into play, tracking it specific to email notifications to management when employees approach defined hourly thresholds. If you have multiple locations or if you have multiple managers who handle the tracking of this and the scheduling of it, having them notified of employees that over or go over thresholds that you've set forth. So your strategy, let's say, is to have everybody average 25 hours. Yeah, having email sent or having notifications sent to the people who are handling that is definitely a key element. Projection tool for determining budgeted and strategy. So if you know that you have X amount of dollars that you can spend on health insurance this year, then a budgeting tool is something that you would need to be able to have. You would be able to move that information along, add employees to it, see if you want to add more staff, or is offering health insurance going to be something that's less expensive than bulking up on staffing, having a lot of turnover. Online enrollment for qualifying eligible employees. Are your employees able to do this online? Do they have information that's sent to them automatically through the system if they do qualify? That goes into your administrative period when they qualify, or is this coming to them automatically, or do you have to do the work for it, and who do you have that's doing it? Automatically calculating maximum employee insurance deductions using safe harbor method. So I said 9.5% was the max amount that you can actually charge somebody for their health insurance, so that's the max amount that can come out of their paycheck if they're W-2ing for what that insurance cost is. Now, you do need to work with your insurance agent in order to be able to develop a plan that meets the 9.5 threshold for you and your employees. Cost projections for health insurance, expense budgeting, and then it accounts for complicated rehire rules, FMLA, jury duty, military service. This is an additional thing that's a major factor for customers that I work with, is that if they are doing these, there are additional rules for rehire or starting an employee that is going to become eligible, where their admin starts, and how you calculate their hours, and if they're off on leave, are going to all be factors that play a part in what you have to send to the Fed to say this person qualifies or this person does not qualify. And if you do not adhere to these rules properly, you may be subject to potentially some penalties and interests that are associated to not offering that. So I kind of go in here. Now, this is what my company provides, and you can actually see however you would want to do it, but these kind of go in and show you what the rules are for our customers. Everybody's going to have a measurement period. You have to determine what that is. Everybody's going to have an admin period. Again, you determine what that is, up to 90 days. Stability period is going to be an amount that equals essentially this number here. So you'll have a stability period that's probably going to be 12 months if you have a 12-month measurement period. Your pay frequency is going to be something that is important because the hours collection has to go, and it's going to be based on a per week measurement. That's how they're going to handle it. So if you are on a semi-monthly or bi-weekly frequency, you probably have an hours collection through your POS. That information is going to get pushed into whatever the system is you're using. That's what's going to pull up the information and show you what the average is. Employee start dates. So you have to decide at the beginning of when you're setting up your ACA how you want to handle employees that qualify for benefits. So if you have an employee that qualifies for benefits, let's just say you're on a bi-weekly payroll and you hire 5 people on a specific bi-week. Now, at the end of their measurement period, 3 of those people qualify for benefits. If you want to do separate admin periods for each one of those people, you would use the hire date. If you wanted to have it all lumped in so you would be able to kind of diminish that amount of work, you can do it all in one at one time, the admin for it anyway. You would use the next payroll start date. Rehire rules. So the 2 options, I had told you about some rehire rules. You can use one of 2 options. You can have a 26-week option, which means that if you have somebody that comes to start working for you and they leave for a period of time less than 26 weeks, they actually count those weeks as 0. It is beneficial for you to have it counted as 0 because then those people are going to have to work much longer hours in order to be able to exceed that 30 threshold. You can also use the parity rule, which basically is a period of time equal to what the person has been working for you. So let's say that that person has been working for you for 30 weeks, then they would have to exceed the 30 weeks being gone before they actually started back from their initial measurement at 0. So if they were working for you for 30 weeks and they came back in week number 31, then you would start from week number 1 measuring them again. It's a whole new measurement period. Now they come back and work with you and they came back in week number 29, then they have 29 weeks of zeros that are calculated into their period of time while they were off. On the right-hand side, you'll see measurement period starts, measurement period ends. Administrative period starts, administrative period ends. This could potentially be a total of 15 months that you have here before you actually have somebody that gets on health insurance. What I mean by that, you have a measurement period that's 12 months. If you have an admin period, 90 days, 3 months, you could essentially have 15 months before the person has become eligible for health insurance. That's the longest that you can have. Stability period then, again, is going to be based on what your measurement and your administrative periods are. I talked about some budgeting concerns that the customers that we work with have. Some of the tools that we provide them is the ability to go in and pull information to show exactly what that cost is going to be for them. So this particular company, you can see that they're at a standard measurement period, which means that they've exceeded their initial. That means that people who have gone past their initial measurement period, they're in their standard. They have a large count of 460, of which they have 80% enrollment. Their annual wages would be this listed here. Annual premiums, contributions, what is the cost to the employer. So this is the budgeting tool that I was telling you about before that we had developed and actually works within our ACA service. I don't know of anybody else that has this, that you can actually even move this information around, find out with whatever the enrollment is, what the cost is actually going to be for you, so you can determine what it is or how many people you can afford to have on your health insurance and what that cost is going to be for next year. It just gives you more information. It can't hurt. It allows you to plan a little bit more accordingly. As you can see here, this information also goes on a per person basis, and it'll tell you what the total employer cost is going to be for each one of those individuals as well. One of the bullet points that I talked about was information being sent or emails that were being sent to your management. You have initial measurement period here, standard measurement, initial admin, and then standard admin. This system actually sends this information over to you, and it can send it over every pay period, every day, once a week, once a bi-week. It depends on who it is, and you can also then determine who the recipient is. So if you want to be able to receive this information, but you're not the person who handles the scheduling, so you can keep up with those folks, then that information would be available as needed. You would be able to stay in front of it without having to ask for this information. The system just automatically generates an email. Again, everybody's going to be a little bit different here, so there may be different setups that you have. This is what I found is effective for our customers and is something that keeps everybody in the loop. That email chain is what really makes a difference to them. Forecasting. So this is kind of small and difficult to see, but what we have here is a 52-week measurement. Every single one of these is a week. We're a few weeks into this. Each one of these is an employee. They'll have a hire date listed here and what type of employee they are. This one shows that they're variable time. Variable time and part-time, same thing. So this system will actually go through and then allow you to forecast what they need to have over the next period of time. So this person has weeks number 40 through 52 that they would need to manage to stay under that 30-hour threshold, so that they would then be considered a variable time employee and not a full-time employee. As you can see in these two, these are people that have finished their measurement periods and they've averaged. This one's averaging 24.75, this one's averaging 33.75. That person's over 30 hours. They are now a full-time employee, and it'll also tell you their enrollment dates. and now you see down here or up here is another measurement period that starts. So if you can imagine, and you can't really see it here, but let's say you have 100 employees. Every single one of these is going to be different probably. All of those folks are not necessarily going to be on the same measurement. They may be at different times in their stage of their initial measurement or their stability periods. That's what makes this so difficult for restaurants, because you have so many people and it's so many moving parts. How do you handle this, and how do you manage this underneath this period of time? And how do you know exactly what that person's going to have to average to make sure that they stay under the 30 hours? Again, if that's your goal, is keeping them underneath that period of time. An additional report here that we have that comes out, and again, this is a little bit of a poor quality in terms of the visibility of it here, but this will show you your line of employees who have exceeded their 30-hour threshold, and then a line of employees that are underneath it. If your goal is to keep your employees or a certain number of employees over that and bump hours into them, that would be the group that you would want to bump those hours into. It also shows if they've received that eligibility, what the dates were, and have they confirmed or denied that coverage. So those people, if they are offered coverage, a lot of times will not take it. Again, like I said, if you told them that you're going to take $10 out of their paycheck, they may not elect to do it. So they may elect not to take it. You have to have some type of tracking mechanism to say we offered this and now it's not qualified. This person doesn't want it. They'll start the measurement again. We talked about, additionally, Brian, last week or a couple weeks ago, what are some things that my customers are doing who are now going to be subject to a lot of additional expenses for their health insurance? What are some things that they could do to kind of reduce their expenses? And one thing that I find most restaurants are not familiar with is the work opportunity tax credit. So anybody that hires a person or hires an employee could potentially receive some type of tax credit for hiring that person. Unfortunately, you can't go back. It's only for new hires. But tax credits for restaurants are something that historically have been very successful in finding money. A couple of the companies that nationally receive the most in tax credits are McDonald's and Walmart. And the reason for it is because they're applicant pool and they're actually doing the tracking for it. We do, again, work with a lot of McDonald's, so this is something that comes up quite a bit for us. So some of this information here, again, you may not necessarily be able to see it very well because it's kind of small. But tax credits are eligible within specific zip codes or zones. They're location-based tax credits. Tax credits are eligible for employees who have, according to the federal government, had barriers to gainful employment in the past. And those groups could be people who are on public assistance. So let's say that they're on food stamps or WIC or TANF or anything like that. Those employees, and if you know that you have them and you're not familiar with this, you are losing out on those credits currently. So what you have to do essentially is qualify them when they're hired. Ask them those questions. It's all on a federal form. It's okay to ask. Or we do this and we implement it within our system. So within the ACI system, within our payroll reporting system, this is something that we do. There are other companies out there that do it. It's not necessarily always an integrated activity. We do telephonic support, so we will actually walk through the questions with the employee that you have. The credits are going to be fairly substantial. Here you see this number 2,400 to 9,000. That 2,400 has stayed fairly steady. 9,000, and that's actually going up to 9,600. There are specific groups, military veterans, disabled military veterans that have been on some type of public assistance in the past that have now become eligible for this if you hire them. So you get the right person, and you can have a $9,600 credit against your business tax liability. So the credits, they actually work as a dollar-for-dollar reduction. Let's say at the end of the year, you have a $100,000 tax liability on what you made that year. If you have a $10,000 tax credit, you actually now only owe $90,000. I have had one restaurant tell me that they actually had more credits than they had tax liabilities. If that happens, then you can actually push those credits forward for 20 years, and you can actually pull them back into last year's return for 1 year. So you can amend the return from last year if you have a substantial amount of credits and you'd like to be able to do an amendment. So now that I've talked myself out, kind of in conclusion, then Ryan, I'll let you take it over, I guess.
Well, thank you for for saving me at the start of this. For those of you who jumped in a couple minutes in, we had a technical difficulty at the beginning of the presentation, and then we were live, and I didn't know we were live. But anyways, I thank Ryan for that. We have a couple questions actually in the chat box, and I had a couple of questions that I wanted to address with you. But again, so I don't forget, thank you. That was fantastic information. I know I wasn't completely familiar with, especially those work opportunity tax credits. We might have to do another presentation just on that. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions there. But I want to get to a question that Miho, am I pronouncing that right, asked. Who checks the FTEs?
They haven't really given us a very good explanation of who exactly is going to handle that. The IRS is always going to be involved. Department of Health and Human Services. They don't know exactly who, or we don't know exactly who it is that's going to need those reports. But essentially, you're going to have to be able to provide them to some government agency when they come down with those.
Basically, it's going to be completely up to us to keep track of them, and then it's going to be a matter of what, if we get audited or not, that we have those records, or are we going to have to provide proof with something?
Yeah, essentially, at least the way that I understand it is the business, as you're moving forward and doing your returns, is going to have to essentially be able to determine what the number of employees that they had for that calendar year will going to be, so that when their employers go to the state exchanges and elect to take coverage, that they know against your Fed ID as a business associated to where they're showing their employment, they would be able to be determined by their hours. So those hours are also going to be be something that you will have to substantiate in one way, shape, or form. I don't know exactly how other people are doing it right now. A lot of it is kind of up in the air for how they're handling it. My expertise is a little bit more about my system and how we handle it and how we're showing that. But yeah, they're going to ask you for the information. You're going to have to be able to produce it. You're going to have to be able to corroborate that information once you determine to be the 50 FTE. And so the suggestion on that would probably be to work with your accounting professional to determine exactly what that number is. And if you have questions, again, you can always send that information over to me. And I guess we'll probably provide my contact information here at some point as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, I've got a couple more questions here, and it looked like someone was possibly typing one. But if you want to put your contact information in the chat box at minimum, so people have it right away, and then I will also be forwarding it on to people. But really quick, we'll wrap this up here. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question. I just want to make sure, now that they're counting 30 hours as full time, that's not going to affect our overtime at 40 hours, correct?
No, not to the best of my understanding. The 30.
They're not changing that on us.
Well, pretty much everything with this has been a moving target. Yeah, and kind of one thing that I don't know if it was on before we actually started the presentation. We were on air there for a period of time. But one of the things that kind of came down was that this is something that actually was supposed to have already been out there. Businesses were already supposed to be subject to this, just like the individual mandate, the employer mandate only got pushed back July of last year. So the way that they sent out the information for this and kind of got this out to business owners was very lackadaisical, and most folks weren't aware of it. But they were 6 months or 8-9 months into measurement periods for these businesses before they said, well, nobody's actually understands how to track this yet. We're going to actually push it back a year. And that's why they kind of did that. It was July 2nd, I believe, is when President Obama had pushed that back. So that, along with a lot of other things, are moving targets. And, you know, unfortunately, it's hard to say that this is a black and white type of thing and give a yes or no answer to some of it. But you kind of have to roll with the punches as this kind of comes around. But really, my the advice that I would give would be to make sure you do understand what that number is. Set up some type of standard that you have with your business. Make sure that you have some type of strategy and a plan that kind of goes into it. And as you roll through, that 30-hour mark is now considered full-time as it pertains to health insurance. Other things a little bit different, but as it pertains to health insurance, the 30 hours is the new rule that you need to pay attention to.
Well, and I don't know if you can see the question on Miho, or I hope I'm pronouncing that right, wrote a follow-up. So I can have 50 FTEs and only have 10 employees work over 30 hours, and I would have to offer insurance to those 10 employees?
Well, that's the business's decision whether they want to pay or play. So that goes into the penalty, or they want to offer insurance. So they don't necessarily have to. With the example that you have here, if you're considered a large employer and you're over the 50 FTE and you have 10 employees who are over that, they don't exceed the 30 threshold that you have as your get out of penalty free card is probably the best way to put it, that would hit you. So if he's only got 10, then you could just elect not to offer coverage, and you would be electing to pay the penalty, even though in your circumstance that number would not be over where you would actually have to pay out that amount. But these things are subject to change. The penalties are going to change as we move forward. So a $2,000 penalty now is actually going to be greater next year and the year after that, same as individual mandates. The penalties are small now, but the idea of the federal government for health insurance is that they want every American on affordable insurance, or that, at least that's what you hear all the time. And the way that they're going to do that is by making sure that people go to their exchanges and get it individually if they're not offered it by their employers. And if they are employed, they're going to make it so that their employers are putting them on health insurance.
What they call affordable and what we consider affordable might be two different things. Cause I just got a bill yesterday that my insurance tripled. So
yeah, if you're doing well, and yeah, part of I'm passionate about this because I work with a lot of folks, and the first customer that I had when I first started this, working with our system and brought them on because they work with person who they called up and asked about the ACA, and they knew more about it than he did, so they elected to move away from that system as quickly as they possibly could. But their problem is that they've got a very successful business. They're large. They're not going to change the number of employees really that they have. They don't want to change their product because their product is good. They don't want to change their service because their service is good. So they wanted to maintain status quo as much as possible, and we're just trying to find a way to tweak a couple little things that were going to make a change there. And if they didn't, the way that they were tracking, at least last year, was that they were going to have about 50 people that were going to hit on their health insurance. Even if they had 30 of those go off, if they weren't offering that insurance, they still had 20 at $2,000 was not going to be something that was feasible for them, as opposed to just managing that number a little bit more efficiently so that they can get their employees underneath that 30 threshold.
Wow. I don't want to bore people to death with any more questions. I've got one more, and I think that's the one that people want to know, is you talked about those tax credits and the opportunities, the work opportunities. How do we find out more about those? You mentioned zip codes and eligibilities and what they're worth. Is there anything that we can do, or do we have to get in touch with someone like you, with our payroll professional?
My suggestion would be to outsource it. There are a number of companies that actually handle that. My company does it internally. I don't know of very many payroll companies that actually do work opportunity tax credits internally. But if you Google it, I'm sure that you'd be able to find some of that information. I hate to give that answer, but yeah, if you do just Google work opportunity tax credit or WOTC, you will pull some information. If you have specific questions about your locations, you can email me. I posted my email address there. I'd be happy to answer any of the questions that you have. I'd be happy to look that information up for you. It is something that again, when you're looking at how you can change the amount or what you're taking home and keep it as close to the same as you had for years prior if you're having an offer health insurance. That for my customers has been one of the quickest and easiest things that they've implemented. My company doesn't charge for it. It's just something that we link in. So it is an option that a lot of people choose to do.
Great. Well, let's wrap this up here then. It sounds like one of the best things to do then, and I think what you're offering is anyone who wants to at least reach out via email, or maybe you want to put your phone number in here, to at least have kind of a quick phone call with you and see if there's anything you can help them with or anything that they're leaving on the table here. Sounds like we really need a partner more than ever in our business to help us out and kind of navigate how complicated this all is.
Yeah, and anytime that you have somebody that works with a specific industry that has experience in it, always a good idea to talk to that person and find out and research it. Find out what are the things that make a difference. For me, I look at everything that I can possibly do that can integrate within payroll. And there's always different things. How can you lower your food costs? How can you bring more people through the door? And the back of the house payroll stuff is not necessarily always one of the things that people are most interested in, but it can be a very significant impact and return on your investment. If you would like that, yeah, I'd be able to help out as much as I possibly can.
Great. Well, we've got your email address in there as well as your phone number. If for any reason anyone misses it, they all know how to get in touch with me and forward them on to you. If they do, I would just ask if you guys do give Ryan a call, let him know that came over from this webinar here. And again, I want to thank Ryan. I want to thank everyone for attending. Sorry for the rough start there, and I hope everyone has an absolutely wonderful day.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks. Bye-bye.